Hey guys, and welcome to Film Artsy, your number one source for all things films and movies. And with the release of Wonder Woman 1984 finally here and finally able to watch either at cinemas or you can stream it through HBO Max, there is definitely a lot of hype around this movie, especially with all of the massive delays that were surrounding the film. So with the movie being delayed time after time again and just things being shifted around, the movie is finally here and there's definitely a lot of things to be excited about. But does the movie live up to the hype that was kind of set up around this film, and does it even live up to its predecessor, the first Wonder Woman movie, that kind of set a very high bar? So we're going to talk about that a bit today. We're also going to look into the pretty big moment at the end of the film that could have major implications for the future of Wonder Woman and even the DCEU. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the video. But first, let's go ahead and jump into this. Now, of course, this movie does have a really big time jump from the first film taking place in the 1980s, which is really interesting because from the trailers early on, we knew that the film would really lean into this aesthetic that was notorious with the 1980s, and it was going to kind of be a pretty big pivotal change from that first Wonder Woman movie. And it seems like the director Patty Jenkins did a really great job at stylizing this film in a very unique way, where it feels like a fresh new adventure and doesn't rely too heavily on the same beats from the first Wonder Woman movie. Now, we do have a pretty big segment of the film that ties back directly to that first film, and you can see the similarities there, and you can tell this is a continuation of that original story. And the fact that we still have some returning cast members, it really can build up into that and lean into that first story. However, at the same time, this story is, for the most part, its own adventure through and through. And while for the most part it does a really great job at introducing new plot lines and characters, at some points in the film it does feel like it's maybe missing a little bit of that charm that the first film had, that it played so heavily on. But obviously, as characters develop and change, they can't continuously play onto the same type of emotions or themes that the first film did. So instead, it branches off into other directions and develops other sides of the characters, which works really well in this case. Though if you went in looking for a direct sequel or a movie that felt like the first film, you're not necessarily going to get that same experience, but you are going to get a unique experience, which in our opinion ended up being a very good decision overall for the sake of this film. However, on the flip side, there are some really cool things that they did that have parallels to the first film. For instance, the first film drew a lot of real-world historical context to the story, and in this film we actually get that as well. There's a lot of leaning into kind of that 1980s end of the Cold War in America historical context that ties everything together and kind of makes this adventure through the 80s a little bit more meaningful and a little bit more impactful, as it has larger implications for the story and why certain things matter. But seriously, the visuals alone in this film are absolutely top notch. It's just really cool how each scene is framed, and overall that side of it is a really fun story. We get characters like Diana and Steve obviously returning, but it's kind of unique where in this case we felt like there was development for both of these characters, though it seemed like the length of how the characters have changed and evolved through this film maybe is a little bit more limited than the length that they went in that first film. We do see Diana moving through kind of a very unique emotional arc, though it doesn't seem as expansive or dramatic as the first film, but still meaningful and important for the character. Where on the other hand, it seemed like the moments with Steve in the film really were kind of the high points of the movie. His character brought a lot out of this film and definitely contributed way more to the story, the plot, and the tension than his character did in the first film, which is definitely worth noting because that character development was one of the best parts of the overall story and definitely something we really appreciated. Then there's some really unique things going on with the antagonist characters along the way, and that's built up in a really interesting way, and it seems like there is kind of a larger sense of motives behind a lot of the antagonists. No one's just kind of fitting into this bad guy for the sake of being a bad guy or a villain character for the sake of being a villain character, which is always something we're worried about when it comes to these superhero movies. But they kind of built it up in a believable way, but then sometimes it always feels like there's some bigger bad lurking in the background that plays up into things that maybe doesn't have that depth kind of added in. But nonetheless, this movie, all in all, from beginning to end, is a pretty enjoyable film. There's definitely a lot of mixed reactions when you look into how the movie's being received, but we think that when this film is fully available and fully released everywhere, it's going to land in the more positive sector. I think a lot of people really are going to enjoy this movie, especially with the large draw of films in general this year, and the movie ending up being a pretty good movie to begin with. Probably will get a little bit of an extra appreciation for the state of the world right now while this film releases. So we do think the movie is worth the watch. It's definitely a great movie to see if you're looking to see something in cinemas or you just want to stream it. That's also a really cool option now available. And while we don't think this movie tops the predecessor, we think it is at least on par, but in its own unique way. And it's not going to be a story that completely mirrors the first film, but it does a lot of really cool things on its own, both visually and narratively, and that's something that a lot of people should really appreciate that they did with this movie. Now, what's going to be really interesting is when and if we will see another movie in this series. We've heard Patty Jenkins kind of suggest that there will be a third movie at some point, and it would have a more contemporary feel with the film. Though we've talked about this on the channel already, and you can check out our video on this, we know Patty Jenkins is signed on with Disney to direct the next Star Wars Rogue Squadron movie, so that will likely cause this film, if there is a third film to come out, to be put back for quite some time. Though when we finally do get a third movie, it will be interesting to see where a lot of these plot points go and how a third film will kind of build up to the culmination of a lot of these storylines that were introduced in the first film, carried through the second film, or the new points introduced in the second film, and see where they kind of lead up to in a third film. And then of course, if we want to go into a little bit more spoiler territory, there is a really unique post-credits scene, which is super exciting, and a lot of people might not fully understand the context and why it's such a cool thing that ended up happening. But essentially, if you watch the mid-credits stinger that they do, we find this character who essentially said that she wore the Wonder Woman winged armor before and had been doing it for a while. Her name is Asteria, and a lot of people are maybe a little confused who this character is, but essentially this actress is Linda Carter, who played Wonder Woman in the 1970s television show from way back, which is really unique because essentially there was a lot of speculation as to what significance that character could have, especially because HBO Max just randomly added the show onto their streaming service just a few days before the movie released. But this is in fact the same actress, which does lead a lot of speculation as to what this could mean for the future of the DCEU, for Justice League, and for Wonder Woman into the next film, because essentially seeing this character does kind of potentially lead into more of how DC is going to try to play into their multiverse even more. We know there's been a lot of speculation as to how they're going to be branching into different timelines, with various actors from over the years possibly coming back to reprise their roles, much like what Marvel is also doing. But there's been those same rumors and same storylines being introduced, especially surrounding the Flashpoint film that's set to release sometime in the future. Now we're starting to wonder if the main intentions of a lot of these little cameos or things like we're seeing right now with this actress returning could be building up for more types of things like that in the later films. Remember, we actually already saw the Flash from the DCEU cross over into the Arrowverse briefly, and the Arrowverse has been fully embracing a lot of different actors from previous DC films and TV shows and doing a ton of cameos wherever they could. So we're starting to see this multiverse grow already, and this might be one more step in that direction, in solidifying that there is a multiverse and that these characters can kind of be shifted and move around quite a bit. Besides the fact that's a really cool Easter egg and a really cool cameo to people who recognize Wonder Woman, especially from the TV show back in the day, this kind of a very unique way of bringing a older character into the sense of making an appearance alongside the new generation of that character. So that's really interesting as well. We wanted to turn it around to you guys. What do you think of this movie? Did it end up landing and hitting all the beats you hoped it would? Or did you end up being disappointed by it? Let us know what you think and why or why not in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos like this, uploaded every single day of the week. That's it for today though. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.
I'm about to.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
See you guys.
Know anybody?